Okay, awesome. I am alive. I'm super excited to be talking to you guys today because today we are going to be talking about the best supplements for adrenal fatigue. And before I get into that, we're talking about people that are exhausted, they're burnt out, they don't handle their stressors very well, they crash in the middle of the day, they don't have energy, they don't focus, they don't concentrate, they don't get up with bounding amounts of energy, and they're just not living the life that they want to. But the frustrating part is that they go to the doctor and the doctor tells them there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. And so what do? You go on the internet and you search for different groups. You find this one, and then you ask me, hey, what's the best supplements for adrenal fatigue? So my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the adrenal fatigue recovery ninja. And today I want to address what are the best supplements for adrenal fatigue. But I want to go back to when you go to the doctor and they say there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. I want you to understand that's probably the number one truth that you need to understand. I just created a revamped seminar. It's called The 5 Truths to Adrenal Fatigue, and that will be available shortly. I'll make sure that there's a link underneath this video wherever I post it. If you are a member of my Facebook group, then great, you're watching this live. If you're not a member and you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Make sure you go and see the links underneath the channel so that you can see where you can go and get these exclusive videos. And also make sure you check out the truth about adrenal fatigue. So let's go back to that. The first thing I want you to understand is that you go to the doctor. I don't want you telling them that you have adrenal fatigue. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. The number one truth about adrenal fatigue is there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. There isn't in the least in the world of traditional medicine. It's not taught in the medical schools. It's not taught in the curriculum. It's not in the peer-reviewed journals. It's defined as adrenal insufficiency. It's a very small percentage of people that have this autoimmune phenomena. But the problem is the paradigm shift is old. They do outdated models like they do with a lot of things like TSH and the thyroid model. They don't look at all of the feedback loops that are required. They have outdated testing. They don't look at genetics and the role that genetics play. And specifically, they don't look at the Dutch test, which is a 4-point, if not 5-point urine sample that's taken throughout the day. And then you can also look at your cortisol awakening response, which is when you first wake up in the morning, within the first half hour to an hour, you see your cortisol levels, they should at least double and then start coming back down. Now, the test that we are going to be reviewing is an old test. So it's not going to be looking at the Dutch Plus. The Dutch Plus being the 4-point urine samples with the salivary samples first thing in the morning. It's going to be looking at the Dutch Complete. The reason I picked this one is because it is an example of someone who's dealing with an exhaustion problem. So first thing I want you to understand is, number one, don't go to your doctor and tell them you have adrenal fatigue. They'll look at you like you're crazy. It's not in the medical research. It's not in the peer-reviewed journals. You need to learn how to speak their language. Their language is, I have potentially a HPA axis dysfunction. I have a feedback loop problem. I have an overstimulated, detox, overwhelmed, just not being able to meet a supply and demand. That's what I would tell you to tell them is, your supply and your demand is not working, meaning you're not producing energy at the demand that your body demands it to be able to multitask, raise the kids, balance the checkbook, earn an income, study, do the things around the house, be able to engage in meaningful relationships. You don't have enough supply to meet that demand. That's what I want you to understand. So now let's get into, hey, Joel, what's the best supplements for adrenal fatigue? That's what I want to answer for you guys today. So what I want to look at is, I want to look at this profile here. It's a Dutch Complete program. And what I want you to look at first is this. First I want you to look at the rhythm. So when we first wake up, you can pretty much see that this person here is flatlined, and they have a really low cortisol spike. And so what I do when I first look at a test like this is I look, is this curve flat? is this all the way turned to the left, the free fraction of the cortisol rhythm. So that's the amount that's available for use. That's the amount of free fraction of the hormone that you can use to get inside the cell. It's the amount that you use when you look at a saliva test and you make big conclusions like, oh, my saliva levels are super high or super low, so I got to take more cortisol to raise them, or I got to take less cortisol to lower it, or I got to take something to raise my cortisol levels or something to lower my cortisol levels. Now, in this particular patient's instant, that would work, because if you look at their metabolized cortisol, how much did they produce for that given time period? That could be anywhere between 85 to 90% of the total output for the day. You got to think about it. This test, the way it works is dinner time, bedtime, when you first wake up, and 2 hours later. So dinner time the night before and 2 hours later, in my book, not 24 hours, right? If I ate dinner at 6, I wake up at 6 in the morning, and then I do it 2 hours later, that's 8. There's a time frame there where there's 10 hours where I'm not, so it's a 14-hour window of how much cortisol did I produce for the day. That's metabolized. And then you have DHEA, or your total DHEA, that's produced by your adrenal, which has a couple of other hormones or metabolites called androgens that are produced by your adrenals that measure that. So what I tell patients is, this is your curve, that's your rhythm, that's your circadian rhythm, that's made by the hippocampus, the temporal lobe. People that have off rhythms, they have bad memory problems. They don't focus, they don't concentrate. Where did I put my keys? All of these types of things. Then we look at the free fraction. How much is available? I tell people, that's how much do you have available in your wallet at any one time to spend? Not very much at all. How much did you spend? Your accountant comes up to you and says, how much did you spend at the end of the day? Not very much at all. And then how much is left in your bank account? Not very much at all. This person, if the doctor didn't believe in adrenal fatigue, they don't even know what a Dutch test is, let alone believe in adrenal fatigue. But if this person came in, which is a friend of mine, unfortunately, this is a colleague's wife, and she's having a real tough time, but she's exhausted. I mean, this is pure adrenal exhaustion. She could go ahead and do an ACTH test to see if there's an autoimmune phenomena, but there's no rhythm, there's no free fraction, there's no metabolized, there's nothing in the bank account. They've bit the farm. So what could we do right away? Well, I'd want to know, first of all, you could give them cortisol, or they could go on hydrocortisone. But I want to know more things, right? Because I want to get to the root cause of the problem. I don't just want to hear, take this reductionistic approach. You got low, we're going to make it high. We're just going to fill up the oil. There's a crack in the valve, or there's a crack in the pipe. It's leaking, but we don't care. We're just going to keep filling it up and waiting for it to empty, filling it up, waiting it for empty. That's the traditional approach. That's the old way of doing things. The new way of doing things is understanding why, how, when, where, what, all of those things. So basically, I would want to go and say, okay, our adrenals are down-regulated. They're not producing any cortisol. The HPA axis is off. That's what we tell from the metabolized. Their free fraction is completely low, and they are not outputting at any time of the day, and their bank account is low. So let's go look at their sex hormones, and let's see if they actually have a little bit of sex hormone production. Their estrogen, this is a 41-year-old female. Their estrogen is low. Should it be that low? I don't think so. It should be higher, unless they're having early menopause, but that's really low. Her progesterone is at least a little bit there. She is ovulating. It's not in the postmenopausal ranges, and her testosterone is low. So she's low across the board. She's low across the board. So the first thing that I would want to do is go and look at her total cholesterol levels, right? Because cholesterol, whether the doctors would like you to believe, is not the boogeyman. It's not, oh my God, we got to make these, these Lipitor and Pfizer, these billions of dollars, and everyone's got to be less than 100, and we got to put it in the tap water. That's not how cholesterol works. Cholesterol is very important for brain function. Cholesterol is very important for hormone production. Cholesterol is very important for nerve function. There's more studies that show cholesterol is more of a problem when cholesterol is very scary low than too high. And as much as drug companies make gazillions of dollars wanting you to be less than 100, it's not a shining badge of honor to have low cholesterol. But anyways, she's low. So when I look at her cholesterol, I think her cholesterol is in the 130s. I'd want to know, hey, what's your diet like? You know, are you eating healthy fats, or is healthy fats a concern for you because you don't digest them very well? Or are you concerned because you're going to gain weight? Or are you concerned because they don't taste good? Or they're, you know, or they just aren't part of your diet? I'd want to work on that. And in her case, they are low. So the best supplement raising her total cortisol, her metabolized cortisol, her free cortisol, her DHEA, her estrogen, her testosterone, her progesterone is healthier fats. When I was a personal trainer, I just had graduated undergraduate. I got a degree, my first degree in exercise physiology. I was a bit of a smart ass, excuse the language. And someone who was really, you know, overweight would ask me, hey, what's the best exercise for your abs? And I would tell them it's the fridge and your diet, because there's no supplement in here that or machine in here that's going to make you have a six-pack abs over a layer of subcutaneous fat. And it's kind of the same answer I would say here is, what's the best supplement for raising your hormone levels? Healthy fats. I mean, really, healthy fats. And get off your cholesterol lowering medication if it's very, very low and your glucose levels are controlled. However, we could in this instance recommend pregnenolone, right? Because pregnenolone is right underneath that sort of hourglass of at the wedding, you're pouring the wine bottle, and the wine bottle goes into all the other funnels underneath it, and you're pouring it there. You could put as the first cup that goes in there, pregnenolone. And pregnenolone would be very supportive for her. I'd probably recommend 30 milligrams to start, maybe 50 milligrams, maybe 75 milligrams. Research shows you can go up to 100 milligrams, but it wouldn't be a set it and forget it and say, hey, I've hereby sentenced you for a life of pregnenolone for the rest of your life. Like I see when I have clients come in and I say, oh my gosh, how long have you been on here? And, you know, well, we were on here since the Reagan administration. I mean, really? Like, who's monitoring this? You don't need to be on that for that long. We need to be able to jumpstart you and supplement you. That's what the word supplement means, supplement you. So I would recommend pregnenolone, but it may not be the very first thing I recommend. I'd obviously recommend looking at her cholesterol levels. She could even do a little bit of DHEA as well to fill up sort of two of those funnels that would help fill up. But again, not the very first thing that I'd be thinking about. Also, why is she so depleted? That's the question. I once had a client really upset with me when I told her what was going on with the temperature gauge, but I wasn't telling her what was responsible for the temperature. And she was like, well, what's doing all of this? And I'm like, well, I don't know. You took advantage of a Dutch test promotion that we did. We don't know what's going on with your blood work. That's why I don't do that very much anymore. We don't know if you have reoccurring viruses. We don't know if you have a major stressor in your life, like a marriage or a financial or a house or an environmental chemical or a toxin or a heavy metal. I don't know, but I know that it's completely low. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And she was upset with me. I'm like, well, sorry, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly why this is happening. But if you'd like for me to care more than you're going to care for your health, it's not going to work. She didn't want to do extra testing because I guess she wasn't at the bottom of the barrel and she wasn't looking to get her life back. But either way, I can't control that. So the next thing I want to look at, though, is I want to look at her, the next page, which is her testosterone and her estrogen metabolites. So what we're looking at now is her pregnenolone. You can see, again, her DHEA is very low. Testosterone is very low. Total DHEA is made up of DHEAS, iocolonilone, and angiosterone, and her body is preferring to go into a 5-alpha production. 5-alpha is very important because when we look at 5-alpha, it's a funny enzyme. Under stress, 5-alpha could be upregulated, and that's where you tend to see women that are PCOS, they're androgen dominant, they have facial hair or unwanted hair, multiple cysts on their ovaries, maybe their insulin levels are super high, they have abnormal periods, and they're going down the 5-alpha pathway. On other instances, women who have maybe high androgens, I just did a review today, she had high androgens and she was going down the 5-beta pathway. And that was more protective, less androgenic. And there are nutrients that you can do to reduce the androgens, things like chrycine, zinc, saw palmetto, daniama, nettles, stuff like that. But again, I don't just want to throw supplements at you without knowing what's going on. That's why I'm the smart aleck guy and say, hey, what's the best, exercise for your abs? And I'll tell them it's, the food that you put in your mouth is the best one. Same thing. What's the best supplement for adrenals? It's the stress, it's the immune system, it's your blood sugar, it's your DNA susceptibilities. That's the best supplement for your abs. Hopefully that made a lot of sense. Then we look at her estrogens and we want to see how well she's clearing them. And of course, she doesn't have very much estrogen. I mean, she has some E1, and I would want that to actually be a little bit lower because it's her second half of the cycle, right? So she is ovulating. She does have a little spike, but not very much of her progesterone, but her estrogen is high. And that could be because of estrogen disruptors, inflammation, protective nature of her body, protecting her body to at least mount some kind of stress response. But we can see she's going down this pathway we call phase 1. She's going down phase 1 nicely. She should be going down 60 to 80% of the time down phase 1. I call that bringing the garbage to the curb. And then she's going down the more cancerous pathway 11.1% of the time. She shouldn't be going down there more than 11%. And then she's going down the more proliferative pathway 18%. So her profile looks really good in terms of her phase 1 is really well. Now, in a lot of instances, when someone is estrogen dominant and they're going down these alternate routes, then you can recommend DIM, right? DIM can be really helpful, but you want to make sure that phase 2 is working well so that you can support the extra garbage that you're bringing to the curb. So what I tell patients is phase 1, you're bringing garbage to the curb. Phase 2, the garbage men are taking it away. If you're speeding up phase 1 because you're really high on estrogen and you have slow methylation, because phase 2 is mostly methylation, MTHFR, CLMT, MTR, and even environmental chemicals, toxins, pesticides, sprays, candida, yeast, mold, all of those things will slow down phase 2, and you'll be pushing phase 1 by getting some DIM, and now you have all these estrogen, that's extra and estrogen combined, estrogen. You'll have all these extra estrogens that are partially metabolized that aren't clearing out. And if you look at this 15 plus 1 plus 9, so let's say she's 16 plus 9, 25 in, and then she has 5.8, let's say that's 7 because she's 5.5, so we're at 7, and plus another 1.4, 8.5. So she's got 25 in, 8.5 out. It's not so good, right? So even though her percentages look good, she's going down the right pathway percentage-wise, she's having a lot that's not coming out, right? And that's a huge problem. So we want to look at some of those enzymes, and a lot of those enzymes are iron dependent. She has a huge iron problem. I'd want to look at her iron genes. I'd want to look at her ferritin. I'd want to look at her transferrin and get an idea what's going on with iron here. It's a major nutrient that can't just say, oh, your serum iron looks good. And while I'm at it, it's ridiculous the ranges that we see now for ferritin. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's outdated. It's like it's like an 8-track tape is what it is. It's so outdated that we need to update that. But anyway, so we can see she's got 25 estrogen units going in, and she's got 9 estrogen units coming out. We got to support that. That's a lot of oxidized iron, estrogen that's depleting her glutathione stores, creating lipid peroxidation. So I hope you can understand that by now, it's not just a matter of what's the best supplements for the adrenals, right? I mean, it's just really not. Then we look at her methylation, and this number should be about half of this number, and it's not. So her methylation is slow, and we would be very wise to not give her DIM without supporting her phase 2 first, right? We want to make sure the garbage men are ready to take on the garbage, especially if they're not doing a very good job of the garbage that we do bring, and now all of a sudden we bring more garbage. Hopefully that made sense too. The only thing I don't like about doing a Facebook Live through Zoom is I can't see your questions. So make sure that you ask your questions in the chat box, and we'll go and answer them afterward, okay? So now what I want to do is go through the next phase of the test, and we look at her melatonin. So what's really nice about the Dutch Complete and the Dutch Plus, I recommend the Dutch Plus now. In fact, I only do the Dutch Plus now, which is the saliva sample. And if you want more information on how to do that, just DM me and I'll let you know. But basically, her melatonin is at that low end. Melatonin is a very dependent methylated nutrient, and that requires proper B12, so her absorption is probably off. We already know that her cholesterol is low. We know that her iron is low. I know about genetic susceptibilities. She's not making a lot of inhibitory neurotransmitters. And her main complaint is pain. She's got a lot of musculoskeletal pain and nerve damage. And if she isn't absorbing her oxygen and delivering her oxygen and bringing B12 and cholesterol and nutrients to her system, she's not going to repair. And that's a huge problem. Then we look, here's really, really important. So on 11 beta HSD, 11 beta HSD is the general that decides, hey, are we going to have the troops go to war? And that's called cortisol. Or are we going to have the active troops go into Army Reserve? And that's called cortisone. And you can see her body is preferring at a high rate here to go into reserves. Now, we got to think, do we know more than the body? This is my analogy of looking at the body and how it plays and seeing, oh, the thyroid's slowing down. Nah, that's not right. We should make the thyroid speed up and give it a whole bunch of thyroid medication. That'd be the same thing of saying, nah, the body shouldn't be going and putting the active cortisol into cortisone. It's doing the wrong thing. Think about why the body is doing this. It's catabolic. It's inflamed. It's broken down. It's tired. It doesn't have a lot of reserves in the bank. So why would it want to continue to break down and use a lot of the resources that it's already depleted on? It's just fighting to keep the power on. It doesn't want to go for a leisurely tour, right? So, but with that being said, we want to bide some time, right? So one of the best nutrients that we can give for 11 beta HSD, especially with someone that doesn't have high blood pressure, which she's not going to, right? Because she's depleted, her glucose is low, her sodium is low, her minerals are low. She's going to have low blood sugar. She's not going to have high blood pressure, but we can offer licorice root. And licorice root is a natural thing that could help support that 11 beta HSD to go a little bit higher. And I'd want to maybe support that. On the flip side, if 11 beta HSD was too high and she's not sleeping at night, then that's where I could recommend some really great nutrients. And there's a supplement by Premier Research Lab called Tranquinol, and it's got magnolia, ziphus root, scutellaria. Those are all things in the research that are shown to take some of the 11 beta HSD, the Army sergeant that's putting the troops to war, and deactivating them so they could sleep a little bit better. That's a really good clue. And then on the last page, we have the organic acid markers. So we can see that her B12 is within range. I'm surprised to see that. I would have expected it to be depleted. Her B6 levels are within range. Again, I'm surprised. I would have expected to be that depleted. Her glutathione markers are within range. Again, I'm surprised. I would have seen that to be depleted. But there's some genetic SNPs that we need to talk about before I finish this to see why that could happen. And then her dopamine levels are within range, but her adrenaline levels are low. And again, probably a genetic susceptibility, probably microbial disturbances, low iron, low protein absorption. Those are the things I'd be looking at. And then she was on the low end of the melatonin range. So lots go into an interpretation of a Dutch test. But what I wanted to show you actually next was our pyramid. So let's look at the pyramid here, because this is from my buddy, Dr. John Thomas. And what he's done is he's sort of expanded this pyramid for our purposes. Let's take a look at it and show you. So what I want to show you is that MTHFR and B12 and SAMe is at the top of the pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid are things like iron and phentin reactions, which I know that patient has problems with, histamine and mast cell activation, which I know she's got problems with, acetylation, being able to combust and burn fat and protein, which I know she's got problems with, peroxidation and lipid membranes breaking, she has problems with. To me, those are more important supplements, and asking the question why we see such depleted adrenal glands, really. And that's why you cannot look at a Dutch test without looking at a genetic test, without looking at an organic acid test, without looking at your blood test. You just can't do it, or you can't give that person enough information. So anyways, hope you guys got a lot of value out of this. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Stress Recovery Ninja. I'm going to put a link to a thing that I've started to do where if you're dealing with an adrenal problem and doctors don't believe you, and you've been to the doctors and they say there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue, and you need someone to put all the puzzle pieces together like this, and you're serious about getting your health back, I'm going to put a link here to my schedule where you and I can talk, 45-minute conversation up to that, and discuss where are you with your health, where do you want to be, and why aren't you getting there. But I got to tell you this, you got to be serious. You got to be ready to make changes. You got to be more decisive. You got to be an action taker. You got to be knowing that, hey, I've lived my life. I've spent thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars not getting better. And I'm more in pain, and it's more expensive for me to not get better than it is for me to get better. I'll put a link in two links. Number one, the link to my brand new webinar that you can check out. And the second link will be the link for being able to set up a time to do a one-on-one. So anyways, I hope you got a lot of value out of that. Make sure you share this video, you like this video, you comment on this video, and most importantly, you take action from this video. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I look forward to ending your adrenal fatigue nightmare. Thank you so much.